following podcast is sponsored by Robots vs. Dinosaurs. I'm your host, Louis G.
Disclaimer, this podcast is about to spoil several movies from 6 to 20 years old. Lou, read off the list.
Today, Robots vs. Dinosaurs will be spoiling for you, the listener, Michael Bay's Transformers, Transformers Age of Extinction, Beast Wars, Beast Machines, G.I. Joe, The GoBots, that episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where they introduce a new character in the opening credits, Dragon Ball Z, Bumblebee starring John Cena, and Of Mice and Men. Ba weep grana weep niniban.
Ba weep grana weep niniban.
Hello and welcome to Robots vs. Dinosaurs, the podcast where we watch a movie every week and try to determine which one is cooler, robots or dinosaurs. I'm your host, Louis G, and with me as always is my co-host, a new co-host every week. This week, I have my friend and robot enthusiast, PJ Mancuso. PJ, why don't you tell the listeners what movie we're going to be talking about today?
We're going to be talking about Transformers, the movie, 1986.
That's right, the 1986 animated Transformers movie, which some saw as a conclusion to the animated series, although there was at least one more season afterwards. That original animated series is often referred to as G1 Transformers. This movie is seen by a lot of fans as the official ending of the G1 Transformers, for a very big reason that, of course, is a spoiler that we're going to get into. It is something that happens very early on in the movie. This podcast assumes that you've seen this movie or that you're familiar with Transformers or that you don't mind spoilers. We are going to talk about a lot of spoilery things. The notes at the beginning listed the movies that we're going to spoil. The director of this movie was Nelson Shin. Are you familiar with any of that director's other work?
Yes, actually, Nelson Shin was the founder and owner of Ep106 Studios, which is animation Korea movie productions. And they're pretty well known for working on Saban's The X-Men from 1992, Silver Surfer, The Tick, Savage Dragon, Tiny Toon Adventures, Arthur, and the show they actually got fired from, Batman the Animated Series, due to a lot of subpar work.
Whoa, okay.
Nelson Shin, Ep106 Studios. In animation, a lot of times there are two studios working on the same project. Mm-hmm. So, for example, Transformers, the television show, the movie, it was actually part of Sunbow Productions, which was an animation house in America that worked with Marvel Studios as well at the time. Well, sorry, Marvel Productions. Marvel Studios didn't exist yet. They basically farmed the animation out to different companies in Asia. And the two that were used for Transformers were Ep106 and Toei. Toei Animation, probably best known in the United States for the animation studio behind Dragon Ball Z.
So how did this movie go, or how did Transformers go from the series to this movie?
So funny enough, completely product line driven. They were going to be changing out the current lineup of Transformers that were available in market, in Toys R Us, in whatever toy store you went to at the time. In order to do so, they wanted to have a nice transition between season 2 and season 3 that kind of wrapped up a lot of the characters' stories. I guess
wrapped them up in body bags in some cases.
a lot of people went out unceremoniously.
Some off screen.
Yeah.
I don't know if I wrote down a list of like Autobots I'm really concerned about that I don't know their fate, like Cliff Jumper and Jazz.
I guess they make it. Those two make it.
They do. Okay.
Yeah, they're at the end. They're saved by Daniel when he saves Spike from the acid tank.
Yes. Okay. Daniel's hero moment when he's in that contraption that somehow doesn't break all of his bones when he transforms.
I think about that a lot.
Oh my gosh. I think about how much I want to own that suit, even if it did break all of my bones and turn them into jelly. So yeah, you mentioned the toy line was really the biggest, the updates in the toy line, new toys, new characters coming out. PJ, I am, if I'm not mistaken, you're a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan? Are you a Buffy fan?
No, actually, that's a blind spot in my fandom.
Okay.
The Joss Whedon products I mostly know are Firefly and the last 4 seasons of Angel.
Okay.
I think because they led on to SmackDown, or SmackDown came on before Angel. I forget exactly.
Without spoiling it exactly, there is something that happens in one of the later seasons of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where the season begins. You get the opening credits sequence, and there's a new character in the opening credits sequence that they act like has always been there. and then when the episode starts and the whole season goes on, everyone acts like this character has always been there. And it's really jarring. It really throws you off guard. I will say, without spoiling, it pays off later on. But this movie, when I watched it, I remember being a huge fan of the cartoon as a kid. I had a lot of the toys. I had at least 3 of the 4 Dinobots that we see in this movie. I think this movie is one of the biggest reasons why I started making this podcast later on in life. But there are characters in this movie that they just introduce like, yeah, no, these guys have been in Autobot City forever. These guys have been on the Ark forever. Like Ultra Magnus or Hot Rod.
Yes.
Or if I'm not mistaken, Cup. Was Cup introduced before the movie?
No, Cup, Springer, RC, they're all new for this movie as well. We've had a time jump so now there's Daniel, and Spike is an adult. The movie actually does a big time jump too. It's the far off future of 2005.
The year of the Great Cybertronian War, 2005. We all remember that.
Oh, I remember it distinctly. It was what a time to be alive.
Wasn't that the same year Marty McFly rode a hoverboard?
Oh, was that? No, it was because I remember the whole we should be dressing like this and where are my hoverboards.
I will say though, the new characters they introduce, they do a really good job of individualizing them. They're actually some of the starkest characters in all of Transformers, in my opinion. Springer is actually like one of the robots that I kept coming back to. I was like, this guy keeps getting these really great moments. He seems to have some sort of back history with RC that's implied, but like not really explicit. There's some really interesting stuff with Hot Rod and Cup that I liked too. I think that was a great idea to introduce both of those characters and to pair them together the way that they did.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because this was, I did 2 rewatches of this movie. To prepare. And for the first time, I noticed 2 things that I probably should have noticed 20 years ago, but I didn't. And they were actually involving Cup and Hot Rod. Funny enough, Cup has a gimmick of telling war stories.
Yep.
They set it up where, he tells a story. Grimlock, one of the Dinobots, is very interested in hearing his stories. All the Dinobots love his stories.
Tell Grimlock about the petrol rabbits again.
Which is actually of a Mice and Men reference.
Is it? Can you expand on that a little?
Oh, geez, I gotta find that.
We can come back to that. I'll write that down.
Yeah, one sec. Cup's storytelling sequence of where the shuttle is drawn from the novel of Mice and Men, complete with Grimlock in the Lenny role asking Cup to tell Grimlock about the petro rabbits again, which I think might have been along the lines of tell Lenny about the rabbits again, or something to that.
Yeah, man. All right, so I got to add Of Mice and Men to our spoiler list, which, man, you know what's fun about my spoiler list? I don't know if listeners have noticed this, but often I list a few of the movies that we actually talk about, and then just some fun ones that I think have funny titles. And I think that when listeners listen to this episode and the spoiler warning says Of Mice and Men, they're gonna be like, yeah, okay. Transformers isn't gonna spoil Of Mice and Men for me.
Yeah, I know. Of all the films to connect to Of Mice and Men, Transformers the movie is pretty low on the list.
Yeah. Okay, this is a place I want to start unpacking this movie. It is the year 2005. The treacherous Decepticons have conquered the Autobots' home planet of Cybertron. So where is the Decepticons' home planet? I thought that they also came from Cybertron. I thought it was a civil war on Cybertron.
Yeah, that line has always kind of thrown me for a loop. Being a big Transformers fan, a lot of different continuity floating around. Even at that time, there was a Marvel comic that was out and the television show. The television show was a bit more on the kid-friendly side, and the comic was a bit more mature. In both of those both the comic and the television show, it was a civil war. And it's funny for them to say, like you said, at the beginning of this movie, the Autobots' home planet. So I guess that assumes the Autobots lived on the planet and kicked the Decepticons out, or what?
I guess maybe it's like saying, had things gone differently in U.S. history, the the rebels have conquered the home country of the Union.
Yeah. And it's interesting with the Decepticons, because later media will have far more complex background behind the Civil War that they have. I highly recommend IDW's comic run prior to the current run, actually, that had such a fun cast of characters and put people in the forefront, but had a wonderful backstory behind Megatron, how he turned into a despotic Decepticon. But
Okay.
in this case, yeah, it's something along the lines of the Decepticons were a political insurgency within the planet of Cybertron, and Autobots and Decepticons. God, now I am confusing my continuities. We're two factions on the same planet. So I guess in this case, the narrator will be pushing forth the notion that the Autobots are the true rightful owners of Cybertron. And I guess all they have now are their moons.
Yep. And only one of them by the end of the movie, right?
Very true.
So I have a few general questions about the movie that we're gonna dig into as we go along. The first thing that I just want to mention up front, so that I want to front load this because it's something that's going to pop up repeatedly. We are gonna discover through our discussion, is this movie a musical? And I want to, my entry point on that is the opening credits of the movie is such a great example of how the 1980s really knew how to use rock and roll to pump you up for the movie you were about to watch. Especially when you're a kid sitting in a theater and you're excited to see your best friends, Optimus Prime and Bumblebee and all his buddies. And there's this rockin' soundtrack with a hard-hitting drum beat. And you're just like, I was watching, PJ, I was sitting in my home on Friday night watching this movie, fist pumping in the air, just like rocking out. I was so excited for this. It just really instantly ignited that nostalgia in me and got me pumped up. How did you feel about like when the credits were rolling?
That is the best opening credits song. I think, I don't want to pin myself into a box, but it is one of the best opening credit songs ever. So much glam behind that. Arena rock is kind of the overarching soundtrack throughout, outside of the score. The movie leans heavily on these things, and the Transformers theme, which was fun on television, in this case performed by Lion.
Yes.
It just absolutely shreds. Every time it comes on, I get tingly and I get pumped because I know it's setting me up for something. Although I will say it comes after that wonderful kick-ass opening comes in right after Unicron, our big bad of the film, devours an entire planet, and then tonally we shift to rocking out to Transformers.
Annihilation of an entire planet. Transformers.
Exactly.
Yeah, it gets serious right away. This movie slaps you in the face and tells you to sit down and watch because it is not going to be easy. You're going to cry, but you're going to laugh and you're going to have fun. And by the end of it, you're just going to have gone on an emotional journey. One of my arguments for this movie being a musical is a song that comes a little bit later, shortly after that Transformers rock and roll version. I don't remember the name of it, but it's Dare to keep all your dreams alive. And we go from that message, dare to survive, dare to keep all your dreams alive, to dare to be stupid.
Yes.
So the music itself tells the story progressively throughout the movie, I would argue.
100%. Dare was actually written specifically for the film, performed by the same person who also performs The Touch, another song that's widely known for this movie. And his name's Stan Bush. He's the performer on that. The touch actually not written for this movie at all. It was written for a movie called Cobra and didn't end up getting used in that. And so they picked it up for this. And whereas Dare to Be Stupid is performed by Weird Al Yankovic. You kind of go, okay, where does Arena Rock and Weird Al Yankovic fit in? And they kind of meet somewhere pleasantly in the middle because of the score that's around the film as well. But I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dare to Be Stupid is the strongest argument for this movie being a musical.
How so? I'd love to hear your argument on this.
Yes, I think from what we see on screen, the characters actually can hear this song because they're dancing to it at some point. And it's very much choreographed to this song. And I guess maybe we could... we could argue that the Junkions, perhaps, they're in this scene, are playing the song. They do live TV. They do specifically speak only in sound bites from television commercials.
Yeah, we talk TV.
Eric Idle playing the lead junkie on there, actually, from Monty Python.
Can I ask you, just for our listeners, if they're not familiar with this, can you give us like a brief explanation of the difference between diegetic and non-diegetic?
Yes, the simplest of explanations would be diegetic music is music that the characters are aware of happening and being known to them. So we hear it as an audience, but the characters also hear it. Whereas in a lot of movies, you'll have licensed music or other songs played in the scene that don't actually get heard by the characters. They are unaware of them. It sets like a city location, like, crash in on LA and you hear I Love LA played by Toy Story composer.
Randy Newman, yeah. So smash cut, we cut to LA. We hear I Love LA by Randy Newman. The characters are not aware of this being played around them. Whereas diegetic music, I think a good current example of that would be in the current season of Umbrella Academy. 3 of the characters put on the twist and dance to the twist, and they are very aware that the twist is playing. I agree with you, PJ, that the robots dancing to the music is very solid evidence that it's diegetic. My theory is that, and the movie, I feel like the movie lays the groundwork for this pretty well, that the Junkions, are they called Junkions?
Yes, Junkions.
Wheeljack, is that the main Eric Idle's name?
No, he is Wreck-Gar.
And no, Wheeljack is an Autobot. Wheelie is the little rhyming bot that they meet on Junk Planet. Okay.
Yes. Friend find, look behind.
Friend find, look behind. So
Wheelie, funny enough, in the comic is a bit of a badass at times. I remember distinctly him sniping a Decepticon and saying something along the lines of, "Wheelie not scared, war is declared."
Oh, wow. Dark.
Yeah.
So Wheelie, the Junkions, Wreck-Gar, my theory, I think this is supported by evidence in the movie, is that they are literally playing a Weird Al recording, and that's what they're dancing to. I would have to say I 100% stand by that as my viewpoint as well, especially on rewatches of this movie, because then originally you hear it and you're like, oh, this is a funny song, and then you listen to the lyrics and it's ridiculous, and it's 100% in line of something that the Junkions as a culture would play because of their talking TV and some of the references that come in there, act now, supplies are limited. Do you know, PJ, what I regret that I didn't start this podcast by saying?
I think I know.
Ba weep
grana weep ninny van. I wanted to do the same thing.
Yeah. PJ? Ba weep grana weep ninny.
Ba weep grana weep ninny.
Hello and welcome to Robots. Awesome. Okay. Okay, so I also wrote down from that opening shot, we are in Unicron's perspective. And this is something that I didn't start noticing in movies until later on in life. Perspective. The perspective of who the movie is taking the side of, or whose story they're telling from their point of view. I'll be honest with you, I started noticing this 2 years ago when I saw Infinity War. To some degree, of course, I studied this sort of thing and learned about this sort of thing in school when studying story and storytelling. But Infinity War was a very stark example of this to me, where we start out from the villain's POV. You know, we've got Thanos is trying to acquire the second of his gemstones that he's trying to acquire, and the whole movie is his quest to get those stones. We see his 3-act journey, and the Avengers are like his obstacles in the way. They're the villains of the movie. I'm not saying the movie agrees with Thanos. I'm just saying that it puts things from his perspective, and it establishes that right away. This movie starts with Unicron alone traveling through space, getting to the planet Lothal, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Oof, I'm lying if I even said I knew what the name of this planet was.
It comes up later when the lone survivor who escapes in the ship, I think his name is Kranix. His friend is named Orbilis, and one of the two of them dies. One of the two of them gets in an escape ship, and that escape ship gets horrifically pulled back in. Like just before it reaches escape velocity. It's horrifying to watch. But the other one suffers arguably an even worse fate because he's the one that we see executed by the Quintessence later.
Spare me this mockery of justice.
Great line. So I just want to ask you, in your opinion, PJ, is this movie Unicron's movie? Is Unicron the protagonist of this movie?
So I was thinking about this as you brought it up. He definitely drives a lot of the action post the battle between Optimus and Megatron. Because at that point, if Unicron does not become involved in the story, we then have a transition of power between Optimus and Ultra Magnus and Starscream and Megatron because of the results of that battle. And then we don't have anything else other than the war continuing the way it does, just with Starscream in charge and Ultra Magnus in charge. Unicron becoming involved throws a third party essentially into this, and he gives. Well, I mean, do we want to actually go into? I feel like we're kind of dancing around an elephant in the room here in the beginning of the movie. And that is the results of the battle between Megatron and Optimus Prime.
Oh, sure. Feel free to.
Going back to the idea that this movie was a send-off for a product line. At the time, they didn't know how attached people had become to these characters and how important they were to their daily cartoon watching for children and for those who enjoyed the show. They just thought of it as a product line. Which is evidenced by how little Bumblebee is in this movie compared to how much he's in the show. 100%. Bumblebee has the smallest role in this movie, and he doesn't come back for a very long time. Doesn't have much dialogue either. They they figured they were just updating a product, the toy line. Because at the end of the day, Transformers, G.I. Joe, a lot of the cartoons in the 80s were designed to be 30-minute commercials. Right. For toy lines. So they decided, let's send off our lead toy, Optimus Prime, and our lead villain, Megatron, in a pitched battle that is one of the best choreographed fights ever. They shockingly, especially for the time in American animation, kill Optimus Prime. Yeah. And he doesn't die like in the battle. He dies slowly after the battle, in a very emotional, very human way on his robo-hospital bed. Yeah, on a robo-hospital bed, surrounded by his friends, with a kick-ass lighting effect on a computer panel. You're kind of like, did they really just kill Optimus Prime the first time you watch this film? And kids are crying, and this is actually one of the reasons why the film is actually a bomb. It doesn't do well in the box office. It changes up things that they do for later films. In the G.I. Joe movie, they pull back on killing off Duke because of this. Because Duke clearly dies in that movie, and then at the end they throw in, and Duke's going to be okay. We could add G.I. Joe to the spoilers list. Not surprising for two Hasbro toy lines. Yes. We might also spoil GoBots if you're concerned about that. Psykill, Leader One. I don't know if I know enough about GoBots to actually spoil it. I don't either. They were just part of the transforming toy crazes of the 80s.
Yep. You're absolutely right that this movie introduced a lot of new characters to sell toys. Did they have the concept of triple changers in the toy line before this? Because we see, I think, Blitzwing, and I believe Springer is also a triple changer.
And Astro Train as well.
Oh my God, Astro Train. I could spend this whole podcast talking about Astro Train.
He's a train that transforms into a space shuttle.
Yeah.
Astro Train. It's what's on the box.
Yeah. That is, yeah, it's what's on the box. That's perfectly said.
Blitzwing and Astro Train, I believe, are already around at that point. Springer is a new character for the movie. In fact, he has probably one of my favorite lines in this movie when they're fighting the Decepticons at Autobot City. He picks up a shell and he goes, "I've got better things to do tonight than die."
Yes. Oh, I love Springer. I remember that line. I forgot that was him. I love this character. There's another reason I love him that this might be a good time to unpack it because it kind of goes hand in hand with this Optimus Prime thing. In the cartoon, I've seen Optimus Prime completely dismantled. I've seen him shot up and smoke billowing out of him. And he's always been repaired. They've always found some energon and a welding torch and put him back together and brought him back. And along with every other Transformer that happens to. So when he dies, I'm doing air quotes, when he dies in this movie, I'm like, all right, Optimus is going to come back. And spoiler for the cartoon series, he does. But by the end of the movie, he's still dead. He's perma-dead. And it's even more baffling when Ultra Magnus gets exploded and easily put back together. The movie really picks and chooses who certain types of damage permanently affects and who are just temporarily inconvenienced by it.
I have a direct quote from Flint Dilley, who was listed on the credits as story consultant, actually one of the writers on the film as well. And he said, "Ultra Magnus was not canceled from the product line and therefore could be repaired."
Are you serious?
Yes.
That's the reason?
That's the reason. That's his reason as to why this happens. I mean, there's no story reason other than maybe the Junkions are really good at repairing stuff.
Fair. Okay.
If Optimus had died on the planet Junkion, he would have been just fine.
Sure thing.
But now he is too far gone.
But this is, as we've said a couple times in different ways, this is a war, capital W, 3 exclamation points, war. They do not pull punches. There are moments in this that I was really surprised by. So when Autobot City is transforming, they're shutting it down, they're putting it on lockdown because the Decepticons are invading. There is a moment when it's Hot Rod and Daniel are trying to get back to the city.
Yes.
Springer and RC, and I think Cup is with them, are like trying to, they're activating a panel that's going to close. And RC is like, well, what about Hot Rod and Daniel? They're still outside the city. And Springer's like, yeah, there's no time. Sorry. Later, RC...
I think I know what you're going to say.
RC leaves Daniel behind to fight like 4 Decepticons by himself. And this is the first time he's been in that suit transforming. Later on, man, people just keep getting left behind. Also, I think it's Ultra Magnus has this moment when, I wrote this down. Let me find it. Yeah. Okay, so they almost closed Autobot City before Hot Rod and David get inside. RC complains, but later, Ultra Magnus leaves her behind. And then when they're flying towards the junk planet, they get shot down. I forget who says this, but Cup and Hot Rod just bought it. And Ultra Magnus's response is, Springer says that. Yeah. Ultra Magnus's response, do you remember?
I do.
I can't deal with that now.
Can't deal with that now, yes.
It's Robert Stack, right?
Robert Effin Stack, who most people, I think our age, know from Unsolved Mysteries voiceovers. Mm-hmm. Played Elliot Ness on The Untouchables, went on to do a very funny role in Beavis and Butthead Do America, where he's an ATF agent who orders cavity searches for anybody and everybody.
But in this, he sees his two of his most important lieutenants getting shot down, and his response is, "I can't deal with that now." And it's not callous. It's very real.
I was thinking of exactly that last night as well, watching that moment, because literally in the moment, he's also still trying to keep his team from buying it.
Exactly. For a kid's movie.
Yes.
Quote unquote.
quote unquote kids movie looks better than anything at the time, I feel, related to such a product. I mean, if you look at the television show animated by two of the same studios that do this movie, although this movie is actually all animated by Toei, it looks like an anime. I mean, the detail in it, the shading, the light, the paneling, everything like looks alive. There's so much detail in this movie to the ridiculous degree. I mean, all the insides of Unicron, I like, it's a moment we'll probably talk about in a little bit more detail, but things in battle that pay off in terms of like, oh wow, they actually took the time to make that look different each time he struck that octopus's tentacle or squid's tentacle with his rotor blade. Like he cuts into it 3 times and you see the difference in damage each time. It's kids movie.
I believe you're referring to on Planet of Junk when is it Cup that gets tangled by those tentacles? I wrote that down because I was disappointed. I was trying to determine, is this a robo squid or a roboctopus? And it's not a roboctopus.
Much better.
But robo squid is still cool. But man, that roboctopus is just more fun to say.
And amazingly, that planet has robot everything: robot fish, robot sharks, robot judges,
robot fish eating smaller robot fish.
Yes. It's
I have a general question that I think I want to check in every once in a while when we talk about a character, which is what is the point of this transformer transforming? For example, Unicron, or any of the Dinobots, especially Grimlock. Why, when you have a bipedal form where you have access to all your weapons and any direction you want to fire them in, what do you need to transform for?
So Grimlock, if we want to focus in on Grimlock and Unicron, Grimlock, he's a robot who is a dinosaur. And when he is created, he is not given the same level of intelligence as other Autobots for some reason. The same with the rest of the Dinobots. They are given limited intelligence. Like, I mean, like if you look at it in the show, the Dinobots are impossible to control sometimes in terms of the way they act. And they're basically used as a hammer against anything possible. And so why Grimlock, why he king, why he transformed from robot into dinosaur when he is a robot who can fly? It's because dinosaur is his natural state. And he is a robot dinosaur, and his robot is his alternate form.
PJ, this movie is a perfect movie for us to explore what this podcast is striving to answer, the 2 big questions this podcast is striving to answer. What is a robot and what is a dinosaur? PJ, what is a robot?
So this is actually a question I've struggled with a lot in my life. Not something most people would, because robots are very important to who I am as a person. I love robots. I love everything they're about. I watch a lot of other stuff that have what people might say, wow, cool robot about. Gundam being one, but Gundams aren't a robot. Gundams are a mech because they're piloted by people. To me, a robot is a autonomous, somewhat sentient being, especially in the Transformers case, that is robotic. It's basically a robotic life form that has the same drives, the same willingness as a human does in this case. I mean, the Autobots.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, the Autobots we see mourn death. It's not just another thing turning off. It's not a car breaking down. It's a friend. It's a loved one dying.
That's a really good point. You consider robots living things. You consider them. Yeah, I do too. Do you think that this movie is one of the reasons you feel that way?
100%.
When you close your eyes and you just imagine a robot, or if somebody says the word robot, is something from this movie an image that springs to mind, or do you have another sort of iconic robot image?
Ooh, I grew up with a lot of B-50s sci-fi. So somebody might say robot, and depending on the day of the week, I might think of Forbidden Planet. I might think of Lost in Space. But I would say a good 90% of the time, someone says robot, and I just picture our heroic Autobot leader, not Ultra Magnus.
You mean the Optimus Prime repaint?
Yes, the Optimus Prime shell that built around a white Optimus Prime. I think of Optimus Prime. I do. He has such a presence.
Yeah, I think of Optimus Prime a lot, and to be honest with you, this might sound weird, but I discovered early on in life Optimus Prime was my actual moral compass. I'm not making this up when I say there have been moments in my life where I've thought, what would Optimus Prime do in this situation, and is it the right thing to do? Because he is, you could call him one note, you could call him kind of simplistic, but his dedication to honor, to compassion, to doing the right thing at all costs, even if it's at a great personal cost to him, his lack of ego, everything about him is just very admirable in a leader. He's a great example of leader and somebody that you can easily follow because you know they make the right choices, even if you aren't sure what the right choices are.
He is leader with a capital L. And it's funny that you do mention, as your moral compass, a lot of people felt that way. It's continued since Transformers has been a thing. I remember specifically there was somebody in the Army who changed their name to Optimus Prime. Whoa. Because he represented what he thought were the values of himself and what he should put forward as a soldier. Optimus Prime, like you said, did what had to be done through a moral lens. I mean, he, throughout the show, for the most part, isn't out there to kill Megatron. But in this movie, he's, one shall stand, one shall fall. I mean, Peter Cullen, the voice actor, he's just got such a timbre in his voice, such a presence behind what he says. You get tingly. You like, that's somebody who I would transform into a car and follow into battle.
Transform and roll out.
Exactly. And, he takes it upon himself. He's like, this must come to an end. He must be stopped no matter the cost.
Because this fight has been going on for 2 seasons of the show and long enough for Spike to have a kid. So it's been going on forever. And now the Decepticons are bringing the fight to his front door. And he realizes there's no end to this. Megatron will not rest. And anytime we detain him, he'll escape and just do this again. And this just needs to end. This needs to stop. And I'm ready to now. You've pushed my back to the wall. You pushed me into a corner. And now I'm ready to fight you to the end. And you do definitely hear that in Peter Cullen's voice. It's a mixture of determination and resignation and almost regret that he has to do this. So as a character, I admire Optimus Prime a lot. He is an iconic robot that when I close my eyes, there are 3 robots that, depending on the context, almost immediately come to mind. The Terminators from Terminator, R2-D2, and Optimus Prime. I have a big moral quandary, though, that I want to ask about. Did Prime set Ultra Magnus up to die? And if so, did he know it was necessary?
There's a lot of the idea of fate and destiny in this film. Unicron talks about it at his very last breath. And there is an underlying sword in the stone theme underneath this film, where when Prime goes to hand Ultra Magnus the Autobot matrix of leadership, he drops it. And the person who catches it is Hot Rod. Everything lights up brightly. We have this musical sting. He then hands it over to Ultra Magnus. And in the sense of Prime has died, Ultra Magnus is kind of this in-between because Hot Rod has not yet been, he hasn't yet, I guess, earned or even begun to tap into his own potential to become the leader of the Autobots.
In terms of whether...
I guess to answer your question, though, to answer your question, is he set up?
Yeah.
I think maybe.
Like, do you think Prime knows Ultra Magnus isn't actually the one who will inherit the Matrix, but he needs to be the torchbearer for now. He needs to be the one to carry it until Hot Rod is ready, because he sees Hot Rod's potential early on.
Yes, especially because Ultra Magnus is presented to us, and this is his first appearance, but he's presented us as this warrior, this leader who is probably more of like a battlefield leader as opposed to an overall leader. He might be like a company commander as opposed to a general.
And I think deep in my heart, if Prime had been able to have a conversation with Magnus where he said, listen, I'm going to give you this thing and you're going to have to sacrifice yourself. I think Magnus would say, okay, I'll still do it.
I believe that. And not to say that, you know, I mean, it's almost like the cult of Prime at that point. There's definitely in Transformers fatalism that is also present in Terminator, funny enough. No fate but what we make.
So Unicron is basically Robot Galactus, and it eats planets. Are the planets that it eats robots?
From what we see, he only attacks 2 planets that we see attack. Well, 3 technically. A planetoid with a moon. He attacks the opening planet, which is all robots, and then he attacks Cybertron's moon, which has robots and Spike, and then he attacks Cybertron itself at the end. And so far, all robots. Does that mean he exclusively eats robots? I'm not 100% sure.
Here's more what I mean by my question. They use the term robot planet. This is a robot planet. Cybertron is a robot planet. Earth is a human planet, for example, right? But what I'm asking is Cybertron itself a robot? Is Lethal a robot? I hope I'm getting the name of that planet right. Are the planets that he's eating, that Unicron is eating, are they themselves robots that contain robot inhabitants?
I'm tapping into too many different Transformers mythos. I know that in one series, the planet itself has life to it that is like powered by something. Sparks are created by the planet, and the Transformers themselves are given life by the planet.
Right.
Their bodies are built, but they house a spark that was created by Cybertron.
So I think they are indeed almost living, in a sense, planets, living as much as the robots living on them are. Yeah. I believe that the planet itself has a purpose that it is programmed to do, which is to sustain the life on it. And I think it's further evidence that they themselves, the planets, are living sentient robots, because when Unicron eats them and consumes them, it seems like he's churning their parts into his parts. There's a process where he's not just obliterating them, he's assimilating them.
Yeah. He is Borg. We
are Borg, right?
Yeah. He breaks these things down in such devastating fashion and remorselessness. Because he opens it. It's akin to cracking open a can of tuna for him. You know, I am eating for my sustenance. If something happens to be living here, sorry.
Well, who created Unicron, and what is Unicron's ultimate goal?
I don't know.
There probably is an answer to this.
There is an answer to this.
Which I don't personally know. I'm sure that like the comics or some of the source material has gone into this, but just based on what we're given in the movie, do you have any speculation? Like, does the movie give us enough to speculate on that?
No. The movie just, Unicron shows up and it's like, this is a planet-sized robot that eats other planets. And other than that, we know that he is almost unstoppable from the get-go. I mean, he rolls up on, what was the name that you, Lithone? Yeah.
So for anybody that's been screaming at their speakers, that planet is Lithone. I think I've been saying it Lithon, or Lethal, but it's Lithone maybe.
Yeah, Lift One.
Lit one, yeah. Oh, Unicron certainly lit one up on them.
He did. He decimates them. And And I guess going back to, I guess maybe tying this into your question earlier about, is this Unicron's movie? I don't know if he is the protagonist. He is definitely a driving action, but we don't know enough about him to be invested in him, I feel.
For the listeners, to be clear, because PJ, I believe you and I are on the same page as this. Protagonist does not mean good guy. It's
exactly.
not an equivalence.
Yeah, protagonist is your focus, your point of view for the film. I guess much like Game of Thrones, this has a lot of different point of views that we do follow. I would argue our true protagonist is Hot Rod, because this is his story. This is his sword in the stone. He has to atone for accidentally getting involved in Prime's battle with Megatron and getting Optimus killed.
Did you notice he has a Luke Skywalker moment? He probably has several, but there's one when he's on the ship and he's training with a training bot. Yeah. And all I could think of was this is Hot Rod's hero's journey.
100%. And Cup is very much his Merlin. He saves Cup. He saves his now mentor in that moment where they're fighting underwater, puts them back together. And Cup also plays a well sort of balance too. Hot Rod is brash and hot-headed, Hot Rod. And Cup, I mean, he's a salty war veteran who has seen everything until he doesn't, until he's like, as I was saying earlier, he talks about all these war stories.
Yeah.
And then at the end, when they're going to fight Unicron, Hot Rod says, "Does this remind you of anything?" And he goes, "No, I've never seen anything like this before."
That line really hit me. That was a heavy line.
That was the first time it hit me in terms of my recent rewatch. And I was like, and then I was like, oh, damn, they set it up in the sort of the rule of threes where he's telling war stories. He tells one once, he tells one another time. And then it's like, hey, you got a story about this? No, I've never seen anything like this before. And I've been alive. I mean, the Transformers lived for millions of years. And he's never seen this.
I think he literally tells Hot Rod at one point, we're living a war story right now.
Yeah, he goes, "You're living one."
The Cup and Hot Rod are just such a great pairing. The grizzled veteran and the young, ambitious, excited upstart. They learn from each other. They work really well together. Their dynamic is really funny. They have a lot of funny dialogue exchanges. So I don't mind at all. The thing that we were talking about earlier, I don't mind at all that they're just sort of dropped in front of us. Yeah. And we're just saying like, hey, these are some new Autobots. You like Autobots, right? They're right. I do. I love Autobots. So give me more Autobots. And one of them that looks like a pickup truck. Do you know that's why his name is Cup?
Pick up Cup.
Yeah. PJ, it maybe took me 20 years after watching this movie for the first time before I realized, oh, his name is Cup because he's a pickup truck.
I'm today years old when I found that out.
So that's my, I have a section that we're going to get to later called Something I Think You Don't Know About This Movie. And that is, I think, a really solid one for me. I have one more big question about Unicron.
Yes.
Unicron, to me, visually, looks like the Matrix of Leadership itself when he's in his orb form, when he's in a sphere planet form. Do you think that's deliberate?
Yeah, I mean, aesthetically, he has the same sort of source of light in the center. He is spherical. He has these bounding lines around him similar to the handles that are on the Matrix. I don't think it's a mistake or an accidental coincidence. A lot about this movie is very deliberate in design choice, in lighting choice. Nelson Shin talks about in the commentary, he lit scenes specifically in different colors to represent the different energies, the different factions, the different people, like even the laser beams that shoot out of the weapons of the Autobots and the Decepticons are color coded.
Just like in Star Wars, right?
Exactly. And so
the good guys are red, the bad guys are green.
Yeah. And I think in this case, the good guys are orange and the bad guys are purple. I highly doubt, and it could probably be looked into a bit more, but I highly doubt, in my opinion, that it's a mistake that they have a similar appearance and one is the end of the other. The Matrix is what destroys Galvatron. Wait, sorry, not Galvatron. Jesus, too many Trons. Unicron. I do want to talk about Galvatron at some point.
I love that you said it's like one is the end of the other. There is a repeating theme in multiple Transformers iterations. Beast Wars and Beast Machines go into this. I remember being a teenager and being obsessed with Beast Wars or Beast Machines, and both of them. And there is a line, Megatron gets to this like third or fourth final form after he's become a Transmetal and then a Transmetal 2. And he is hooked into this whole like tapped directly into this energon in the center of the planet Cybertron. And he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega.
Yes.
And this is something that comes up a lot in Transformers, the beginning circling back to the end and creating a new origin point and the story sort of repeating itself. I have a wild theory about Unicron. Would you like to hear it?
I really would.
It's supported by what we've been talking about, though, and his similar appearance to the Matrix of Leadership. I believe that the Matrix of Leadership, I believe this is actually supported in the canon, that it's what created Optimus Prime. I think he was originally a everyday robot named Orion Pax. And
correct.
He was granted leadership abilities. He was granted more capability, and he was upgraded by the Matrix of Leadership because it saw his potential. And I think the Matrix of Leadership itself is indiscriminate. It granted him this power because it saw his potential. And Unicron is someone that started out as a potential Optimus, a potential leader, and his version of amassing army or getting followers was to literally assimilate followers. So he misinterpreted what the Matrix of Leadership wanted him to do and maybe perverted it into his own interpretation. And so his quest is like Galactus. He goes around the galaxy, assimilating other robots into his form to make him bigger. And ultimately, you could argue, his goal is peace. His goal is to have a peaceful universe, because the Autobots and Decepticons are waging war forever against each other, and Unicron is trying to achieve unity. I don't support this, but I'm but I'm saying I think that's his philosophy.
Much like
its philosophy. I shouldn't say his. It's its philosophy.
And much like Galactus, he has heralds as well. He deputizes several former Decepticons and reformats them. And like you said with Optimus and the other good quote unquote good guys in the film, they're transformed through the power of the Matrix, whereas the Decepticons are transformed through the power of Unicron's wizardry. So they're given power from a source that is on a mission of unity/destruction, and the Autobots are given power from something that is about unity as well, till all are one.
Till all are one, yeah. The Hindu philosophy of Brahman, right?
I don't know. Is that the case? Is that
it really is. I learned about I should not sit here and try to sound like I'm an expert on anything involving Hinduism, but
I'm showing my complete negligence in knowledge on this point.
What to be clear, what I'm positing is that Transformers borrowed from Hindu philosophy, not the other way around. But yeah, this idea that the ending of the universe will be when all souls are sort of assimilated back into the one creator, the one enlightened being, and that's how enlightenment and peace will be achieved for all living things. And that's really, again, an oversimplification. But I believe it's possible that Unicron's power is very similar to the Matrix of Leadership's power, but corrupted. It's a corrupted version of it.
I like your theory.
PJ, I have another question about whether or not, or about the definition of robots. Megatron, at some point, has Hot Rod. It's when they're fighting in Unicron's belly, and he tries to choke him to death.
Yes.
Why?
It's funny. They talked about that in the commentary as well. They go, many people have questioned us over the years. Do robots breathe? What is the, I will say Galvatron does have a badass line during that. And I think it's to build the drama of it. It's a pity you Autobots die so easily. Otherwise I'd have some satisfaction or something to that effect.
That sounds right.
Why does he choke him? Because he's evil. He's just inflicting damage. He's inflicting pain. Also,
maybe maybe he's not actually trying to choke him. Maybe he's literally trying to fulfill his promise earlier to crush him with his bare hands.
Ah, there we go.
Starting with his neck,
tear his head off,
or neck joints. Yeah,
and it's also funny because Galvatron has no convictions. Truly, he gets these power. Megatron becomes Galvatron when Unicron finds him floating in space after Starscream unceremoniously throws him out of Astrotrain.
And then Frank Welker gets swapped out for Leonard Nimoy in the booth.
Yes, Leonard Nimoy chewing scenery as Galvatron might be my favorite thing about the movie.
I love it.
There's so many things I love about this movie, but the fact that we have Leonard Nimoy, who in my life primarily known for being Spock, is now a villain and is truly dastardly and cowardly at times as well. Frank Welker, who played Megatron, is I could not even go into detail how many different things that man has worked on. And if you've watched any cartoon at any point in your life, I'm willing to bet Frank Welker played a voice in it. He's just versatile and so wide ranging in what he's able to do that you wouldn't even know he was in the show unless you looked at the credits.
When I was going to watch this movie, I was looking it up on my Apple TV, which shows you like all the services available. I ended up renting it through iTunes, but one of the other available options when I typed in Transformers was a newer movie, I think from 2015 or 2017 maybe. It's a series I'm not familiar with, the Primes or Prime Hunters.
It was a spin-off of Transformers Prime. Or it was like the sort of sequel to Transformers Prime, or the last season of Transformers Prime.
But what I noticed that was delightful was that Frank Welker and Peter Cullen and like a few other names that I recognized were still in the credits. These guys are still voicing these characters to this day, which, I mean, maybe it's a paycheck, but I think it's beyond that. I really do think they love these characters. They love this world. You can hear it in their performances, and the fact that they're still doing it. I can't imagine that any of them needs a paycheck at this point. This franchise is so iconic and has done so well internationally. They must be collecting royalties. Otherwise, they're getting ripped off. But I can't imagine that they don't have some deep love for the property and the characters themselves. What do you think?
Peter Cullen especially is known for being on record as to like when he's like, this does not sound like something Optimus Prime would say. This isn't something he would do. I could be conflating this, but I do remember that there was some sort of issue he had in one of the movies where he's like, Optimus Prime in one of the Michael Bay movies is going to kill or murder or threaten murder on Kelsey Grammer in the film.
No, he disintegrates people, humans. Yeah. He kills humans in that movie. That movie's nuts.
And he was like, this isn't true to Prime. And
PJ, I hope you come back as a guest one day so we can unpack that whole movie, because that is bonkers. And there's a lot of other stuff that Optimus does in that movie, like swearing, like saying he says the F word a couple times, and it's shocking.
I have so many problems with those movies. But and like, you know, Transformers the movie 86, a lot of my love for that film is nostalgia based, but it's also, it's better than it has any right to be, honestly.
And it holds up. I would argue it holds up.
Especially for, like we said, a movie designed to end a product line and start a new product line. It could have been the simplest thing that was created, but they put so much effort into this visually, storyline wise, character development wise. Do they pick up the ball and run with it in the following seasons? Not so well. And I think this movie is also why, like at the time it wasn't a hit, but it resonated with people. It stuck with fans, and it's a good reason as to why Transformers is a very big property again as it is now. I mean, in the last 10, 20 years, Transformers has come back big with the toy line and different animation properties, the movie franchise. And I think a lot of that rests on the back of Transformers from 1986.
Yeah. I have one quick question before we move on to the next bit. Obviously, no one calls Soundwave unchrasmatic, but PJ, I have to ask you, why is Soundwave so cool? It doesn't make sense that Soundwave is cool. I think he's cool. I've always thought he was cool, but looking back, I'm like, he's a cassette player. When he transforms, he has to like be stationary. What makes Soundwave so cool? Is it just the voice?
I think it's a combination of voice and appearance. He almost kind of looks like the Decepticon logo. He has such an amazing voice effect. also Frank Welker, which is similar to his Dr. Claw voice from Inspector Gadget.
When I close my eyes and I picture a robot, I see Optimus Prime. But when I'm like imagining what a robot sounds like, it's Soundwave 100%.
Oh yeah, like the voice, the portrayal, it kills it. He looks cool too. He's got a missile launcher on his shoulder, and he has a team that he carries in his chest that he can deploy. He has a counterpart in the Autobots, Blaster, played by Scatman Carruthers.
Why is Blaster not cool? Because Blaster's not cool.
I think Blaster's cool.
Okay, fair.
But
fair.
he's not as of a presence that Soundwave is. Soundwave he's purple. He stands out. He's got, and even his I was gonna say his Goombas, his team that he shoots out of his chest, his goons, his cassette tapes. They all have distinction as well in their personality. Whereas, like, I couldn't tell you the name of any of Blaster's group, but Laserbeak, Ravage,
Rumble, Frenzy.
Yeah.
One of them has like a great line where they're like, first we crack the shell, then we crack the nuts inside.
Exactly.
And he pops up repeatedly throughout the movie, this tiny little robot fighting these huge robots and like talking smack at them the whole time. It's awesome.
Yeah, they have presence, they have attitude. They when they show up, you notice them. You don't neglect them. You don't shrug them off.
Yeah, Laserbeak plays an integral role spying at the beginning.
Yeah, sets up the other Autobots for murder.
PJ.
Yes.
When Megatron gets upgraded to Galvatron, one of the first things he does is arrive at Starscream's coronation, which is, I love Starscream so much.
My favorite.
He might be my favorite Transformer overall. Like I adore and I admire Optimus Prime, but Starscream is such a fun character, and he's an agent of chaos in a lot of ways that he incites a lot of the fun that we see. He causes a lot of the problems that need to be solved. And so, like, tossing a bunch of survivors out of Astrotrain and taking the crown, literally having a crown made for himself at his coronation. I assume he's the one that ordered some of the robots to be playing trumpets, but then he gets annoyed that they're playing for too long and he blasts the trumpets. And then Galvatron shows up and disintegrates him. And it's shocking to watch. A thing that comes up in a lot of movies with both robots and dinosaurs is this fear, I think, of being completely obliterated, being by a robot getting blasted by its energy weapon and being disintegrated so there's no body to bury. And where that correlates to dinosaur movies is if you're eaten by something, again, you can't have a funeral. You can't,
Yeah.
There are no remains, to honor you with. And I think that's a fear that we tap into a lot with sci-fi movies involving either of these monsters when they're the scary thing. It's this obliteration.
A lack of remembrance, nothing to leave behind. Starscream is an agent of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And funny enough, he, in terms of voice actors, he's played by Chris Latta, who was a stand-up comedian prior to being a voice actor. He plays Cobra Commander as well. He does a lot of other work. He was also a bit of an agent of chaos on set for a lot of things. He gets kicked out of The Simpsons, actually. He was originally the voice of Mr. Burns and Moe, and basically because he was unpleasant to work with, Matt Groening was like, yeah, we don't need you around anymore.
Oh, that's a bummer.
But he brings like an edge. He brings something to Starscream that is perfect for the Decepticons. Is that it's in the name, Decepticons, deceiving, deception.
Treacherous.
Starscream is the ultimate opportunist in the sense of like, okay, I've been trying to take the crown from Megatron for a million years or so. Now I have the perfect opportunity. I still function. Want to bet? And then he gets it thrown back in his face.
Yep.
By Galvatron, because Galvatron shows up and he's like, who's disturbing my coronation here? He's Megatron? He goes, here's a hint. and he just he just vaporizes him. And I think that's, in the case of Galvatron being formerly Megatron, there's definitely a point behind that, and it's, I will erase you from this plane of existence.
Yep.
Because you have dared to cross me. No one will remember you after I do this, in the sense of like, he shows up, he stomps on the crown, and somebody goes, "Who's this guy?" I think it was Rumble
what did he
or
say
Frenzy.
His name was?
Yeah, what did he say his name was? Galvatron. And he just, again, Leonard Nimoy eating the scenery around him like Unicron. Yeah, no, it's definitely like that idea of not having something left behind to be remembered as. Although I'm on record of wanting to be cremated when I pass away. I see no attachment to my being after the fact.
Personally, I want to be tossed in the ocean and eaten by small fish.
Yeah, that's contributing back to the ecosystem.
Yep.
I wouldn't mind becoming a tree.
You know what? I said I didn't support Unicron earlier, but I just said that I want to be assimilated into the planet. So, so maybe I need to do some self-reflection.
Where are the facts, Lou? Where are the facts?
PJ, we talked about what is a robot, and the Dinobots in this movie bring up both of the question of what is a robot, but also what is a dinosaur. So you don't have to answer it in the context of the Dinobots, but in general, what is a dinosaur? What's your definition?
Dinosaurs are love. And I
there it is. Well, you don't even have to say anything. Dinosaurs are love.
Dinosaurs are love. Prior to being a robot enthusiast, as a child, I was a dinosaur enthusiast.
Yes.
In my life growing up, you're either a dino fan or a robo fan. And I guess that kind of trickles down to toy cars, something that's machinery, versus dinosaurs, organic, living, extinct, something that it's at times hard to even imagine existing at any point on the planet compared to what you see around you now. The sheer thought of a megafauna traipsing through Central Park is hard for me to comprehend at times, but I can go to, the Museum of Natural History, and I can see skeletons of dinosaurs. And as I've grown up, the representation of dinosaurs has changed. We've discovered more things about them. Originally, the T-Rex was always very upright, as we see even with Grimlock. He's portrayed as a standing upright T-Rex. Later on, Jurassic Park changes that perception of the T-Rex in that he is more active. He's not lumbering. He's not dragging his tail. Or in this case, in Jurassic Park,
Roberta, yeah.
And
one of my previous guests informed me that they nicknamed that T-Rex Roberta.
Ah.
I did not know that.
And I know how much you love Jurassic Park.
Yeah, it was delightful for me to learn that. I love learning new things about movies. So does this movie would you call the Dinobots dinosaurs? Would you call them proper dinosaurs? Okay, let me word the question this way, because I think this is the best way to ask this. What would you classify the Dinobots as? A robot or a dinosaur? They
are the apex of the two. They assimilate perfectly in that, a dinosaur as an animal, a robot as a piece of machinery, and they kind of hit the sweet spot of if Grimlock was portrayed as intelligent as Optimus Prime, I don't know if I would love Grimlock as much as I do.
And if that were the case, I would lean heavily towards robot. Yes.
They are definitely dinosaurs who happen to be robots.
I like that.
In the sense of like, if dinosaurs continued to evolve to the point where they were speaking, I kind of see that as sort of a progression as to what the Dinobots would be.
PJ, are you a fan of Beast Wars, the series?
So Beast Wars is my Transformers growing up. By the time I could remember seeing TV, we were on the Deke productions of G.I. Joe, not Sunbow. So there was a lot of different animation quality then, different G.I. Joes, some more gimmicky ones like Captain Gridiron, the football throwing, grenade tossing G.I. Joe. And Transformers at that point had already ended. And they were rebroadcasting it as Generation 2 with some 3D animation cut between segments. But the first Transformers I distinctly remember consistently watching was Beast Wars.
Oh, and Beast Wars, They land on prehistoric Earth, and a scanner finds DNA from fossil remains and from some of the living beings on the planet, such as like large insects or gorillas. But 3 of the robots are a Tyrannosaurus Rex, a Velociraptor, and a pterosaur. Only one of them is named Dinobot, which is
correct.
a very simple name, but he's probably the best character on the show. The reason I'm bringing this over to Beast Wars is, I mean, obviously it's a continuation of the Transformers series, but in that series, it's like they assimilate the DNA of the living animal into their makeup, into their robotic makeup. And I'm wondering now, I'm sure that this, again, is an answerable question. The canon probably talks about this, but just from your speculation, are they cyborgs in Beast Wars? And is that distinct from the robots in this movie?
Yeah. So the reason they have to take those animal forms is because at the time the planet has such a concentration of energon that it's poisonous to their robot forms. They can't function. They can transform into their robot forms, but it's for a very limited amount of time initially. Yeah. It's not until transmetals where they become more machine that
it'll overload them, right?
Exactly. They'll start sparking and have electrical charges on the outside of them, and they have to kind of revert back to their beast mode. Interestingly enough, when they transform, it's maximize and terrorize and that, and they're definitely more cyborg-like in the sense because you get the feeling that it is almost an organic outside that's there to protect them in their alt modes, because their alt modes aren't cars, they aren't Jeeps. I mean, if it wasn't,
until they become transmetals. Yeah,
exactly. If it wasn't for the level of energon on the planet, they would have been robots. They would have been anything.
Do you remember later on in Beast Machines, they literally refer to them as technorganic?
Yes. And that's also a big issue in Beast Machines, where like there's a Megatron ends up becoming the leader of Cybertron at that point in time, and he's very against the Maximals, and the Predacons are the villains in that point. But actually, I forget if they changed their name in Beast Machines. I haven't seen Beast Machines in forever.
I'm struggling to remember if they do, because the thing that is like really at the front of my mind is that Beast Machines introduced this character named Botanica, who is a plant.
Yes.
/ robot, which is fascinating. I think unequivocally we have answered this episode has answered that robots, in order to be a robot, it has to be considered a living thing. It has to have some degree of sentience. And I think if there's probably somebody screaming at their speakers right now who's, maybe a robotics engineer that would argue that, a factory line that makes cars is a robot and it doesn't really have sentience or awareness. But I think what we're talking about, our definition of robot is built around the cultural icon of what a robot is. This cultural perception, this agreed upon image of what a robot looks like, sounds like. And I would argue the robots that we now are trying to build, now that we sort of have the technology to make them do the things we've always dreamed of them doing, they're in real life imitating our movie pop culture versions of them in a lot of ways.
Completely. The Boston Dynamics dog robot. I know the military recently even did some testing with robotic dogs. You could give that robot wheels, but it definitely has it's a quadruped, and I had to remember the difference between the two. It's a quadruped, it moves, it has a personality almost to it. Like you said, yes, there are definitely robots that build cars, but I'm not going to go to the theater and watch an hour and a half long movie of a robot arm that moves a door into place to be welded against a car. I'd watch maybe a documentary on that, but
is a car a robot?
Some people will give their cars personalities.
I want to go back to your previous, what you said at the beginning about a Gundam. Gundam is not a robot, it's a mech. And I think a car is a mech.
Yes.
If you think about it, like you're inside of it, you're at the controls, and you're basically using those controls to propel yourself. Like it's like your external exoskeleton that you're sitting inside of, you're strapped into it. Oh, side note, do the Autobots have seatbelts?
It was the 80s. Nobody had seatbelts.
Yeah, there's a moment when Daniel's riding in Hot Rod and he is leaning forward, hands pressed up against the windshield. And I was just like, oh man, that's the worst place you want to be if Hot Rod hits something.
Yeah. No, they have no seatbelts as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
They weren't built with safety in mind.
But they were built with seats though.
Yes.
So, okay.
Well, they used to project holographic people into their seats so that they could deceive people to blend into the backgrounds around them when they were first on the planet.
But PJ, even on Cybertron, before they ever come to Earth, some of their vehicle forms have seats and cockpits. And I wonder if the comics ever go into that.
They're more than meets the eye, and
they are more than meets the eye.
Yeah.
Okay, we are like the Quintessons. We are going to cast down our judgment on robots and dinosaurs. I'm including them both in this movie. On previous episodes, we've covered Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom. We've covered Big Hero 6. Those were movies where it's very clear we're talking about robots in one, we're talking about dinosaurs in another one. I think it's fair in this movie for us to judge both robots and dinosaurs. And what we need, PJ, what I need is, as my guest, I want you to tell me if this movie is a +1 or a -1 for the representation of robots and also for dinosaurs.
Oh, I was going to come in and say that it's a +1 in both to me. As a viewer, Grimlock and the Dinobots have charm to them. They bring a comic relief at times.
Yeah, there's a bit where Slag knocks down a door and he takes a moment to say, "Excuse me."
Exactly. Or when Devastator slams one of them in the head, his eyes comically bounce out of him. And actually, let me double check which Autobot that is, because if I think
it's Sludge. I believe it's Sludge.
I think you're right. So he hits Sludge and his eyes comically pop out of his head and go back down.
Yep.
And then on the other end, this movie is 100% wow, cool robot. Especially the new characters that are added in. They're very flashy. They're very colorful. Cup being the exception of flashy, but he has personality.
Grit.
Yeah. RC. And even Blur, played by the guy who would voice the Micro Machines commercials.
Oh, good pull.
Like, he's actually talking at that speed. He's not sped up in a studio. He is John Machida, and he was found from a FedEx commercial originally. He held the Guinness World Record for the fastest talker for a very long period of time. Like, he would talk in 586 words per minute.
Oh, wow. I believe Eminem recently broke that record with Rap God.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Okay. No,
so.
Sorry. I had no idea.
I can fact check that real quick, but I think I heard that's accurate. That Eminem holds like a land speed record for words per minute in that song "Rap God." I'm just gonna fact check that real quick.
Yeah. And so, who gets the +1? The robots or the dinosaurs?
To be clear, they can both get a +1.
Oh, great. No, then 100%. It's a +1 for both of them. Especially Grimlock steals my heart. He shows up. He saves the day several times. They kick ass, and yet they're fun. They're funny. They're cute. They have a charm to them. And then the rest of the robot cast, not to say that they're not robots, but they are our dinosaur representations here. The rest of the robot cast also, they're there. You care about them. You want to know what's going to happen. You want them to succeed. You want Galvatron to be taken down. You want Unicron to be stopped. Overall, the movie just has so much fun to it. It's so charming. It doesn't even stop at times. It's almost relentless in its pursuit of continuing a story. We have very little downtime and a lot of let's get into this next kick-ass battle where our characters are fighting for their lives. Set to some really good music from...
Is it NRG?
In this case...
Oh, no, that's Instruments of Destruction. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so the movie has two different musical things going on with it. It has its original score, which is composed by Vince DiCola, who other people might know from the Rocky IV soundtrack. The Transformers producers saw that movie and were like, we want your synth sound for Transformers. He was specifically picked for this, and they went to town, and you can see the love in that synthesizer. They pulled in everything that they could to make this. And then on the other hand, you have the original motion picture soundtrack, as it's called, where we have, The Touch, Dare, Nothing's Gonna Stand in Our Way, Escape, Hunger, I mean, like it just pushes forth everything that you're like, I want this scene to continue forever, or I could watch Hot Rod fight the Robo Squid over and over. I mean, songs from this movie have even appeared in other things. Boogie Nights has Mark Wahlberg singing The Touch.
Bumblebee did a diegetic reference to this.
Ah, yes, you're right. Oh, Bumblebee.
When Bumblebee, the car, is trying to urge Haley, is it Haley Atwell? No, that's not the actor. When the car is trying to urge the main character to do the cliff jump, it plays "You've Got the Touch" on the car radio.
Yeah.
Such a great moment. I also, if you've seen Bumblebee, as our resident robot enthusiast and robo fan, I would definitely want to talk about that movie with you sometime, because other than this movie, other than 1986 Transformers, Bumblebee is my favorite Transformers thing that I've seen.
It was the most in tone with the original series. And not to say that the original series tone is perfect. It has its moments, but it also is a television show, a television commercial for toys. So I'm not going to say, it has heart and soul, but it has something to it in terms of a tonality that the movies from even the first Transformers Michael Bay film don't exactly have. They're a little more dark. They're a little more gritty. They're a little more post 9/11 world Transformers. Bumblebee, on the other hand, I think primarily also because it is a period piece, referring to the 80s as a period piece. Somebody yesterday, I was out with a friend, said a movie was a period piece set in the 90s, and I said, please do not refer to the 90s as a period piece. But
it's a good point. I believe that's a good descriptor for it. Okay, for those of you keeping score, so far in our podcast, robots have a score of +5, dinosaurs have a score of +4, but that is only because we've reviewed one more robot movie than dinosaur movie, so they're potentially tied. But that's the current score. Here, before I go on to my two bonus questions, which I don't know if you even knew about. I hope these are a complete surprise. Before we go on to those, I just want to ask, do you have any one last really cool thing that you might have in your back pocket, something you think I don't know about this movie?
So there's a couple of lines in the film that don't seem in line with a children's cartoon show.
Such as, it isn't even dented. Oh shit, what are we going to do now?
Exactly. Or, open, damn it, open. You might go, what, who said that this should be in the script? Who decided that we should have these lines?
Someone who knows what war is, I think.
Well, the true reason is that they wanted it to be a PG-rated film. Otherwise, it potentially would have been a G-rated film, even with the level of violence it has, because it's robots and not human beings dying. They added that line with Spike yelling, "Oh shit," because they wanted a PG rating so that it didn't just show up as a children's cartoon film.
That's an interesting marketing strategy, because you'd think that they'd want the most broad appeal possible. You'd think that they'd want to draw in the core audience, kids who are going to get their parents to bring them to the movie more than anything. But something that we talked about earlier is if you're one of the first kids that goes to see this movie in the theater, and then you go back to you go to school the next day and you tell your friends Optimus Prime died, that might discourage them from wanting to go see it.
Yeah. Especially, at the time, a lot of, movies are marketed by word of mouth and advertisement. So if you show, there's a story of a child who locked themselves in their bathroom for 2 weeks after finding out that Optimus Prime had died.
pretty sure that child was me. I may have blocked that memory out, but
yeah, it's a weird, like, tonality wise, the movie definitely is more anime than American children's animation for the time.
yeah, there's no other property I can think of where we get Cockney Samurai.
Yeah. It's a little all over the place. And even, the first few times I watched it in my teens, because this movie, as I said, this movie I discovered later in my life, later in my youth, I should say. I didn't find it when it was originally broadcast. I was 0 years old. So I was born the same year Transformers, the movie, came out. Mm. And so by the time I watched this movie, I was desperate for more robots, more mecha, more anything. And at the time, there was an anime magazine that was covering this film's re-release on DVD and VHS at the time. Just the stills alone, I was like, this does not look like a Transformers rerun I've seen on TV. This looks like something else. Hmm. And the love that went into this, there's a team of 400 animators that worked on this film. It's a hand-drawn film.
You see it. You see their efforts.
Yeah, I mean, there's, of course, it's a handmade animation, so there's mistakes here and there, but like primarily it looks better than most films that would have been out at the time for children's property. I mean, short of being a Disney movie or maybe a Bluth production, like, Fievel Goes West or something like that, the care that went into this. And actually, in fact, at this point, we haven't even sort of tipped into the Disney resurgence that comes about with The Little Mermaid. Yeah. Little Mermaid is 89. And at that point, we have other studios that have popped up because Disney has started to not produce as good a quality of an animated product. It's why Don Bluth creates his own studio.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you feel like that motivated, this movie in particular motivated Disney to step their game up? Because after this, we get this golden age of Disney. I think I might be biased because I grew up in the 90s. Yeah. So Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King these are like masterpieces in my mind. These are the Disney movies I first think of when I think of Disney. Yeah. So I think I have some bias, but I think it's also easy to argue that each one of those is truly a masterpiece.
And in addition to that, like the success that they had, the songs that they produced, I mean, at that time, by the time we're in Lion King, we've got Elton John singing songs on the movie. And, from there we have Phil Collins doing Tarzan and all of that.
Yeah, and this movie itself brought in some heavy hitters like Robert Stack, Judd Nelson, who's just coming off of The Breakfast Club. Yeah. And his incredible fame in that. And Eric Idle, Leonard Nimoy, Orson Welles.
Yes, the other elephant in the room that I think we missed bringing up, Orson Welles' last recorded performance is Transformers the movie.
Yep, final on-screen appearance.
Yeah. Actually, another movie came out in 87 that had been filmed prior to this. That was his last physical appearance. But this was the last piece of work that he
What movie
did.
Was that? I can fact check it.
Yeah, give me a second. I can find it.
Also, I just want to circle back real quick to something I just updated. The John Moschitta Jr., the Micro Machines guy, yes. His record is 586 words per minute. Eminem on Rap God raps this article is saying he broke his own record, which he established in Rap God recently with Godzilla, and he raps 229 words in 30 seconds, which comes out to 458 words per minute. So I would argue John Moschitta Jr. still holds the record.
There have been other people who have been listed by Guinness as having broken the record.
Okay.
But he does... He contends that, though, John Moschitta Jr., he contends that, and it says that I do not believe that these are timed properly. But I mean,
Okay.
as somebody who had held that record for so long, I think, he's going to fight for it.
All right. PJ, I have 2 bonus questions, and then we'll wrap everything up. So, first bonus question. This is a section of the podcast that we call What's Your Snack? PJ, what's your snack? When you go to the movies, or when you used to go to the movies before we were all stuck in quarantine, what snack did you like to get or bring to the movie theater? And now that you're watching movies at home, do you do the same snack, or do you have different snacks, or do you not snack?
I am a big popcorn aficionado. I love popcorn so much. Just everything about it. I know it's like the quintessential movie snack, but outside of the film, outside of the movies, I eat popcorn. I ate popcorn watching this last night.
Awesome.
Would I dump a box of Raisinets into popcorn here and there? Yes, I've been known to do that.
I like M&Ms with popcorn. I like the chocolate and salt.
That sounds good. Yeah, no, I'm definitely a popcorn guy.
Awesome. Okay, so whether you go to the movies or at home, you like popcorn. Me too. I'm a candy fiend, and my movie candy is Sour Patch Kids. And I opened up a bag of Sour Patch Kids while watching this movie on Friday night, thinking I was going to have self-control. And at some point when I was taking notes, I looked down and the bag was empty, which tells you how much this movie drew me in and put me back in the mind of my child self. And I just had so much fun with it.
So good.
PJ, my last bonus question. If we were to replace any 2 of the actors, or let's say, since this is an animated movie, characters in this movie with Whoopi Goldberg and Danny DeVito, would that improve the movie, and how would you cast them?
I would definitely say that there's a couple of people who are in line for these roles. I would say that Cup is a shoo-in for Danny DeVito.
Oh, wow. Inspired choice.
And like just especially if I picture it as Danny DeVito as Frank from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia as Cup, it's pretty terrible, but at the same time, amazing.
I'm picturing Danny DeVito as all of the Sharkticons.
They do have in robot mode, a similar
stature.
Yes.
Yeah. And a similar stature and surliness.
Yes. Ba weeb grana weeb ninny ban, followed by snacks, followed by attacking.
So where are we casting Whoopi?
Whoopi, I would love to say Whoopi would be Hot Rod. Okay. In that, the way they play off one another.
My gosh, yeah, Hot Rod and oh my god, that'd be a great combination. Whoopi as Cup Whoopi as Hot Rod and DeVito as Cup.
Yeah. The only other parts I would maybe say that they could potentially be it would be funny would be as Danny DeVito as Optimus Prime and Whoopi Goldberg as Megatron.
Yes. How amazing would it be if when Megatron gets upgraded to Galvatron, suddenly his voice is Whoopi Goldberg instead of Leonard Nimoy. Which, you know what? There's a Star Trek crossover there.
Yes.
What's her name on Star Trek? I have to admit, I'm not as huge of a Star Trek fan as some people. What's her name?
Guinan. Okay. Yeah, she's introduced in Star Trek: The Next Generation. The 10 Forwards bartender has. I don't know if she has. I'm trying to remember. If she has empathic abilities but she becomes very much like a counselor in the sense of like a person's bartender being their counselor. Like she's a moral compass at times for people. Picard goes to her for advice. She unfortunately only gets one movie appearance in Star Trek, which is Generations. By the time First Contact is made, she's no longer involved in Star Trek.
But that does mean that she appears with Leonard Nimoy, right?
No, Leonard Nimoy's not in Generations.
It's really showing how little I know about Star Trek.
He does show up in several episodes of Next Gen, but I am not 100% sure if Whoopi Goldberg is in any of those episodes or if they even share a moment together.
I want to be clear. People have probably already thrown their phones across the room. I don't dislike Star Trek. I like Star Trek. I'm just ignorant of it.
I love Star Trek. I'm actually running a Star Trek Adventures role-playing game at the moment.
Very
cool. I grew up with Star Trek. As much as I grew up with Star Wars, I'm one of those people who's in the middle of it. I have no preferred. I watch them for different reasons. If I want to watch something actiony, I'll watch Star Wars. I want to watch something that's a little bit more cerebral, I'll watch Star Trek. Or unless it's the J.J. Abrams Star Trek films, then they're basically Star Wars.
Do you know what, this might be a controversial statement, but do you know what my favorite Star Trek is?
Is it Voyager?
No. No, it's the Orville.
Oh, no. Oh, Orville. Oh.
Listen, I think the Orville captures Gene Roddenberry's vision of future because what's the glob's name? Yannick?
I have actually not watched any of the Orville.
PJ.
I know.
Listen,
I've fallen off of Seth MacFarlane over the last few years.
I understand. I understand you might have an aversion to it, but give it a chance. It is fabulous. It is a wonderful show. So there's a character, Yaphet. There's a character named Yaphet. I'm reading the description directly off of Wikipedia right now. An amorphous, gelatinous, shape-shifting engineer. He looks like just a glob of goo, just sort of oozes around, but like they treat him like he's just a normal crew member. He just turns wrenches. He like has a romance with another crew member. It's this really like casual representation of aliens, and a very diverse, integrated crew. And it mixes humor and thought-provoking ideas of utopia and this peaceful future, this scientific exploration-focused future. Anyway, this is not the Orville podcast.
I do wonder if Yaphet's name is a reference to Yaphet Kotto, who was in Alien.
Oh, good call. Maybe it is. Very likely, because Seth MacFarlane is really good at references, especially deep cut references to things.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have talked about this movie for quite a while, and I could talk about it for hours. But PJ, do you have any final thoughts on Transformers 1986 before we wrap up?
If you're looking for a wonderful time that is in a wonderful 90-minute time frame, it's actually probably a little less than 90 minutes. Something to just put on and entertain yourself with. Transformers the movie is the place to go. You get robots, you get robot dinosaurs, you get some A-list actors chewing the scenery in Leonard Nimoy. You have Orson Welles' final performance on final recorded performance. Someone to Love was the film that was released 2 years after he died. You have Judd Nelson, like you said, coming off The Breakfast Club. And then you also have characters like Springer, who, again, killer one-liners in this film. Hot Rod and Cup being a wonderful duo who play off of each other so well in a mentor-mentee relationship. It's just so much fun. It's the definition of like a wow, cool robot movie.
I love that phrase. You said that phrase a few times. Wow,
yeah.
Cool robot. It's
something that I've learned recently in my rewatching of a lot of Mecha right now. Yeah, like it's just bright colors, awesome scenery, beautiful animation. I've said it before. And maybe it sounds like I'm punching down at the film, but it's better than it has any right to be.
Yeah.
It could have been something so less than what it ended up becoming.
It could have been a 90-minute toy commercial.
It really could have been, but there's love in this film. There's love in the work that went behind it. It just shows on screen. The direction, the lighting, the colors, the presentation, the music. It's very well thought out. Like, I mean, some people might think that the songs are thrown in haphazardly. They're definitely, the action is choreographed to these songs. I can't hear You Got the Touch without Optimus rolling through, crashing into Decepticons, flipping in the air and shooting down Decepticons and fighting Megatron. Like, it's so tied to what that song is, and the songs are tied to what the action is on the movie.
I could not agree more. This is a fantastic movie. If you've listened this far and you haven't seen it, I think that's okay, because if you were just curious about this movie and wanted to hear what we had to think about it, watch it for yourself, because there's nothing like the experience of watching it. Even if we've spoiled it for you, if somehow you've never seen it and you listen to this and we've spoiled it for you, there's nothing like the experience of watching it firsthand and feeling all of those feelings and getting pumped up by the music and all of that, everything that just comes together so well. This is one of my favorite movies. It's probably, if not in my top 10, it's in my top 20. And I'm so glad that you came on to talk about it. As PJ, as a Robo fan and robot enthusiast, I do hope that you come back to talk about more Transformers movies, because there's plenty for us to talk about on Robots versus Dinosaurs. Coming up soon, we are going to talk about Tammy and the T-Rex. We're going to talk about Theodore Rex, which is by the same director as last week's My Science Project, director Jonathan R. Betul. So I said earlier, we've reviewed slightly more robot movies. Dinosaurs are going to have their shot to make a comeback here in the next couple episodes. All right, PJ.
Sorry, the poster for Theodore Rex just popped into my head.
Yo, that's a movie where when I get to the Whoopi Goldberg DeVito question, it's going to be interesting. Do we recast Whoopi or do we keep her where she is? And when we add in DeVito, where does he go? I'm excited for that one.
That's amazing.
All right, PJ, anything that you want to plug or promote before we say goodbye?
Weeb grana weeb niniban.
Weeb grana weeb niniban. Well, PJ, until the next time you come back on Robots versus Dinosaurs, or till all are one.
Till all are one.
Personally, I want to be tossed in the ocean and eaten by small fish.
Yeah.